so next we're going to go ahead and perform a Hoyer lift transfer from bed to wheelchair. But first we're going to go ahead and look at the Hoyer lift itself. The Hoyer lift is an assistive transfer device for extremely large or extremely dependent people. Each particular Hoyer lift will have a weight capacity depending on that make or model. The typical Hoyer lift can hold about a 250 to 300 pound person. It's really important to check and make sure you know the weight capacity on your particular Hoyer lift. Now the Hoyer lift has several different pieces. It has an overhead bar with sling and chains on either side. It has a large metal hydraulic column and a U-shaped base. For the U-shaped base, it is adjustable. So if you go behind, you can adjust this lever to either widen or narrow the surface of the Hoyer lift. This is going to be important for lifting someone into a wheelchair or a bathtub or different wider or narrower surfaces. Also important of note is this knob here. This is going to be to the hydraulic chamber. By turning it to the left, you're opening it, and by turning it to the right, you're closing it. When it's closed, using this lever, you're able to pump and raise the sling and Hoyer lift itself to raise the patient. And when open, you press into this knob with your bar, and it will slowly and controlled lower the patient down to the surface that you'd like. All right, so now that we know a little bit about the Hoyer lift itself and its components, we're going to go ahead and move it over to the patient who is lying in the supine position in the sling. This is a manual Hoyer lift, so we'll move it using only the steering handles. Other Hoyer lifts may be electrically powered and would have different functions and movement. So we'll go ahead and swing this over towards our patient. Now, as we get close, it's going to be important to make sure that we don't hit the patient with either the chains or the overhead bar. As we get it into position over the patient, we are going to go ahead and attach the 3 chains on either side. It's important to have the open end of the S-hook facing away from the patient. That way the patient will not get injured during the transfer itself, whether they're getting scratched on their skin or what. So we'll go ahead and attach If I could have you go ahead and sit up for me. Okay, I'll go ahead and do the other side as well then. And for this, I have the lift a little bit too high, so I will go ahead and lower it slightly to adjust for the height of the table. Alright, and there we have all 6 of the chains connected. Okay, now that the patient is in with all of the chains attached to the sling, first thing you want to just double check that our valve is closed, which it is. And now we're going to pump the handle to raise the patient into a safe sitting position, just off of the table. Okay. As you would, go ahead and tuck your knees towards your chest. Now, as we're at this point, he's clear from the table. We're going to now help swing the lower extremities off of the table to help clear. Now, in this position, it's important to tell the patient to keep their knees above their waist, whether they tuck those, hold onto those. For added stability, they can also grab onto the overhead bar if they're starting to feel uncomfortable. The next step is to go ahead and maneuver the patient into the proper alignment to complete the transfer, in this case the wheelchair. You want to be cautious of swaying of the patient in the sling. You also want to be able to communicate with the patient. You want to ask them if they're comfortable. If they're not comfortable and they're kind of swaying around, you may need to have another physical therapist come and help steady them, or you yourself can help hold and steady the chains. For the wheelchair, you want to make sure the wheelchair is in the locked position. And then once we move the Hoyer lift, we want to go ahead and open it into the wide position to allow for the transfer. Now we're going to go ahead and maneuver them into position. Next, I'm going to slowly open the hydraulic release valve, and I'm going to slowly lower the patient into the wheelchair. Now I want him to sit as fully down into the chair as you can, so if I could have you tuck your knees as much as you can. I'm going to apply some slight pressure into the knees to force him to sit back fully into the wheelchair. All right, so now that the patient is fully sitting in the wheelchair, the next thing you want to do is go ahead and fully close the hydraulic valve. At this point, you can go ahead and remove the chains from the sling, which we will do. The sling itself can remain in place. This is to make the secondary transfer back to the bed from the wheelchair more efficient. Next, you can go ahead and remove the Hoyer lift from your patient and return it to its normally narrowed position. And that's how to complete the transfer from bed to wheelchair. It's important to maintain two key points. You want to maintain communication with the patient, especially when they're in the air, to make sure that if they are feeling unstable, that you yourself can help stabilize either the overhead bar, the sling, or the chains, or to have another additional physical therapist come and help maintain that as well. You also want to be cautious raising or lowering the patient to make sure that you know at all times whether the valve is open or closed to prevent any dropping of the patient or any injury.